They didn't know her name. They didn't know her history. And yet, in less than 24 hours, the woman they'd ignored for years would decide whether their empire thrived or collapsed. What they did know, what the CEO bellowed across the executive floor with the force of a gavel, was this: bring me the head scientist. What none of them expected was who would answer. I want you to picture something with me. And if you believe in stories where the underestimated rise to rewrite the ending, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe, and share this one with someone who needs the reminder, because what happened that day still makes my chest tighten every time I think about it. It began on a Wednesday morning, clear skies above the glass and steel fortress of Novacor Biotech, a building so tall it seemed to slice the wind in half. Inside, the air was already charged, humming with that peculiar kind of tension that comes when millions, no, billions, of dollars hang on the outcome of a single decision. I was there, though not in the room that mattered, not at first. My post was one floor down, at the threshold where the executive level met the service corridors, where polished marble gave way to scuffed linoleum, and where you could almost hear the change in people's voices depending on which side of the threshold they stood. It started with the slam of Richard Vance's office door, sharp, percussive, like the start of a symphony nobody wanted to hear. His voice followed, slicing down the hallway before the man himself appeared. "Bring me the head scientist," he roared, pacing like a general whose troops had failed him. His tone had that dangerous mix of rage and desperation, the kind that made seasoned executives shrink into themselves. I'd heard about the problem in fragments, the contract from East Africa that arrived in a tangle of Swahili, French, and dense biochemical jargon, so specialized it might as well have been written in code. The scientist who could have translated it was trapped overseas by a sudden travel restriction, and the clock was ticking. They had 24 hours to accept or lose the deal to a rival. And from what I'd gathered, this deal wasn't just lucrative, it was potentially history-making. I watched from the edge as his executive assistants scattered like birds flushed from a field, each one clutching a phone to their ear, speaking in rapid, clipped tones. Vance swept into the glass-walled conference room, the kind that made everything look like it belonged in a magazine spread, and barked at his VP of operations. "I don't care how you do it. Find me someone who can read this thing and get it right. If we botch one clause, one decimal, we're cooked." His voice dropped into something colder. "And don't tell me to use Google Translate. We're not amateurs." From where I stood, the conference table gleamed under the recessed lighting, surrounded by leather chairs that had never known a janitor's weight. I knew because I'd cleaned them for years without ever sitting in one. That morning, as I wheeled my cart past the open door, I caught sight of the document itself, a thick stack of pages bound with a red ribbon, the kind of formal gesture that told you the sender took tradition seriously. Even at a glance, my mind caught the structure of the sentences, the rhythm of the language, and the specialized terms buried in the text. I felt the old instinct stir, the part of me that still fought in lab reports and field notes, the part that remembered late nights under a microscope and the quiet thrill of a successful experiment. But that was another life, one I had buried when the world forced me to trade my lab coat for rubber gloves. No one in that room knew who I was beyond the name on my ID badge. They didn't know I once defended a doctoral thesis on biochemical engineering in front of a panel twice as intimidating as Vance. They didn't know I'd led a research team in Accra that cracked a protein-folding puzzle their current head scientist had been chasing unsuccessfully for years. All they knew was that I made their desks shine and emptied their trash before sunrise. And to be fair, I'd made it easy for them to believe that was all I could do. Keeping my head down, blending into the background, that was survival. But as I lingered, pretending to adjust the angle of a chair, I heard the VP mutter something that made the room laugh. Short, cruel. "Maybe we should check with the cleaning crew," he said, smirking, "see if anyone knows Swahili." The laughter wasn't loud, but it was sharp, and it landed exactly where they meant it to. My hand stilled on the chair back. They didn't mean me personally. They didn't mean anything, really, but it carried that easy dismissal of the people who keep their world running while being invisible to it. And that's the thing about invisibility. It's a double-edged sword. It protects you, until it doesn't. From my vantage point, I could see Vance's reflection in the glass wall as he rubbed his temple, muttering to his chief of staff about options, about calling in favors, about buying time from the overseas firm. None of it would work. The overseas CEO, from what I remembered about her, was a stickler for precision and for deadlines. You got it right and on time, or you didn't get it at all. The red ribbon on that document wasn't just decoration. It was a warning. Respect our terms or walk away. I thought about walking away myself. It wasn't my problem. It wasn't my company. And yet, my stomach was tight. My pulse was up. Not because I wanted to save them, exactly, but because something in me hated watching knowledge treated like an inconvenience. Hated watching a room full of people with all the resources in the world flounder while the answer sat in plain sight. My sight. One of the junior analysts emerged from the room, phone to her ear, her expression pinched. "The best we can do is get a partial translation by tomorrow afternoon," she said into the phone. I knew without asking that partial wouldn't cut it. This wasn't a game you could play half right. I pushed my cart toward the service elevator, telling myself I'd leave it alone. But as the doors closed, my eyes caught the faintest movement, the red ribbon fluttering as if stirred by a breeze, though the conference room was sealed. It was absurd, but in that instant, I thought of it like a summons. Down in the storage level, the quiet was absolute, the kind of silence where your own thoughts seemed to echo. I should have let it go. I should have. Instead, I opened my locker and stared at the one thing I'd kept from my former life. A slim, worn notebook filled with formulas, notes, and sketches. Pages in my own hand from the days when I'd been Dr. Aisha Mensa, not the woman in the navy polo shirt pushing a cart. My fingers traced the margin notes in 3 languages, my handwriting steady, my mind clear. Upstairs, they were scrambling. Down here, I was remembering. And the thing about remembering is, once it starts, it doesn't like to stop. That's when I knew I wouldn't be able to ignore it. I told myself it would just be a quick look, one glance at the document to satisfy my own curiosity. But if you've ever been fluent in a language other people around you can't understand, you'll know what I mean when I say, once your eyes start decoding it, the rest of the world fades. I waited until the floor was mostly empty, the hum of after-hours cleaners and the low drone of air conditioning filling the background. My cart was my cover, as always. I rolled it straight to the glass conference room where the stack of pages still sat on the table, red ribbon intact. Through the pane, the city's night lights glinted off the paper, the ink catching the glow and faint sheen. I stepped inside, letting the door hush close behind me. No one would question me being there. A cleaner's job is to be invisible, even in plain sight. I untied the ribbon and laid the first page flat. The heading alone told me what they'd missed. This wasn't a simple contract. It was a layered, almost ceremonial agreement, blending hard science with cultural protocols, something that would be impossible to translate word for word without losing meaning. As I scanned the first paragraph, I felt the pull, that deep mental click of comprehension that used to be my daily bread. In less than 30 seconds, I spotted a mistranslation from the earlier attempts I'd overheard. What they thought meant exclusive license actually meant exclusive stewardship, a term that implied not just rights but responsibilities in research ethics. If they signed the wrong version, they'd not only breach the spirit of the deal, they'd invite lawsuits from regulatory bodies across 3 continents. That was the moment I stopped telling myself I was just curious. I pulled out my own notebook, yes, the one from my locker, and began writing corrections. Not the whole document, just 1 page. My handwriting flowed easily, mapping precise meanings, adding cultural footnotes in the margins. At the bottom, without thinking too hard about it, I signed only with my initials, AM. I slid the corrected page to the top of the stack and retied the ribbon. The next morning, I wheeled my cart down the executive corridor just in time to hear voices raised in surprise. "Who fixed this?" someone asked inside the conference room. The tone wasn't angry. If anything, it sounded impressed. A few beats later, the VP's voice came, low and annoyed. "Nobody's owning up to it? Fine. We'll use the corrections. But someone needs to find out how this happened." That's when the paranoia started. By noon, I overheard the head of security briefing the CEO. No unauthorized entries logged, no camera footage showing anything suspicious. Whoever did it was either on the inside, or very, very good at hiding. I kept my head down, pushing my cart, emptying bins, making sure to look busy in all the right places. It might have ended there, my 1-page intervention folded into their process, unnoticed and uncredited, except for one thing. They got cocky. They thought the anonymous fix was a stroke of luck they could replicate. By late afternoon, they were deep into mistranslating a technical section about enzyme stabilizers, turning a precise storage requirement into something that sounded like an optional suggestion. One slip like that, and the whole formula would fail in manufacturing. So I left another note that night. Just a few lines correcting their error, with an extra side comment about a related clause they hadn't even touched yet. Again, I signed it AM. By the third morning, my edits were being treated like manna from heaven by the legal team. But not everyone was happy. I caught the VP's voice drifting from the conference room. I don't like this. We're being watched. Whoever's doing this knows too much. Too much. That last part had weight to it, the kind that makes the room go still. I was about to leave when I noticed the CEO leaning back in his chair, speaking in that low, deliberate way people use when they're thinking out loud. Whoever AM is, they're either saving our necks or setting us up. I want them found. It didn't take long for suspicion to settle on the invisible staff. We were the ones with after-hours access, the ones nobody monitored closely, the ones who could stand in a room without being seen. By mid-afternoon, a security officer approached me near the break room, his tone polite but probing. "We're checking in with everyone who's been on the executive floor this week," he said, asking about my movements, my keys, my schedule. I answered simply, evenly, leaning into the image they'd built of me, a woman who kept her head down and her work neat. I even let my accent thicken slightly, the way I did when I wanted people to underestimate my English. It seemed to work, until the VP himself cornered me near the supply closet. He leaned against the doorframe, studying me with a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. "Interesting thing about initials," he said. "They're a lot like fingerprints if you know where to look. Tell me, what's AM stand for?" I played dumb. "I'm sorry, sir, I don't know what you mean." His smile sharpened. "Oh, I think you do." He leaned in closer. "See, I checked your personnel file. Aisha Mensa. Ghanaian, right? Fluent in English. And what was it? Chui. Maybe a little French." The way he said it, like he was picking through my life as though it belonged to him, made my stomach knot. I realized then he wasn't guessing. He'd already decided it was me. And in that moment, I understood what he was after. Not the truth, but control of it. "You're playing a dangerous game," he said finally, before walking away. That night, I didn't go to the conference room. I sat in the staff locker area instead, turning my jade pen over in my fingers. The initials had been a mistake. They'd drawn him closer. But the alternative, staying silent while they blundered into a deal that would destroy them, felt wrong in a way that clawed at me. Not because I cared about saving their empire, but because I cared about the science, about the integrity of the work. By morning, the air on the executive floor felt heavier, like a storm pressing down before it breaks. Security was posted near the elevators. The VP was all false charm, smiling too wide, speaking too softly. And then, in the middle of the 10 a.m. meeting, Vance slammed his palm on the table and said, "Enough. Whoever AM is, come forward." Now, the silence that followed was thick enough to chew. My heart thudded so loud I was sure someone could hear it. I kept my eyes on the table I was polishing, pretending not to notice the way the room seemed to tilt toward me. And then Vance repeated it, slower this time. "Bring me the head scientist." No one moved. No one spoke. I put down the cloth. The cloth made a soft thump against the polished wood as I set it down. For a moment, nobody registered what was happening, just the faint buzz of the overhead lights and the muffled hum of the city far below. Then I stepped forward, not toward the exit like they expected, but straight into the center of the conference room. The security guard by the door tensed. The VP's smirk was back, quick and shallow, like he'd been waiting for this moment to pounce. "I can finish the translation," I said. My voice was calm, steady, but it landed in the room like a dropped glass. Vance's brow furrowed. "Excuse me. You want the head scientist?" I rested my hands lightly on the back of one of their leather chairs. "For the next 24 hours, that's me." A few of them laughed, short, disbelieving bursts. The VP's laugh was louder than the rest, practiced and derisive. "With all due respect, Miss Mensa, mopping floors doesn't make you a scientist." I met his eyes, letting the silence stretch until the others started shifting in their seats. "No," I said finally, "but defending a doctoral thesis in biochemical engineering might." The laughter stopped. "We're leading a protein folding research team that solved the puzzle your current head scientist hasn't cracked in 3 years. I turned to Vance. We're publishing 12 peer-reviewed papers in journals your R&D department still cites. A murmur rippled around the table. Vance's gaze sharpened, the businessman in him catching the scent of leverage before his pride caught up. If you have those credentials, why are you? He gestured vaguely, his hand flicking toward my cart. Because when I arrived in this country, the job market didn't care what was on my CV. Immigration red tape didn't care. Survival doesn't wait for the right offer. My tone wasn't bitter, just factual. So, I took the work that was available. And I did it well. But I never stopped knowing what I know. The VP leaned forward, trying to regain control. If you're so capable, why hide it? Because people like you, I said without heat. Look at someone in a uniform like mine and assume you already know everything worth knowing about them. Vance cut in before the VP could reply. You've been making the corrections? The AM notes. Yes. And you're telling me you can translate the entire document, accurately, in time for the deadline? Yes, I said again. If you give me the resources and stay out of my way. The VP scoffed, but Vance's expression had shifted. The risk in his eyes was wrestling with the potential reward. What do you need? Access to the full file, uninterrupted workspace, and immunity from any retaliation when this is over. I want it in writing. Sign. He hesitated for only a beat before turning to his chief of staff. Draw it up. The VP's voice spiked, almost breaking. Richard, this is absurd. You're going to trust. I'm going to trust results, Vance said, flat as a blade. Then to me, you have until 8 tomorrow morning. They moved me into a smaller conference room down the hall, one with a frosted glass door. The contract was already there when I arrived, along with a fresh pot of coffee and a laptop. I set out my notebook and, with a small moment of ceremony, took the jade pen from my pocket. My father's pen. Its weight steadied my hands, sharpened my focus. The night blurred into a flow of language, culture, and chemistry. Some sections I translated word for word. Others I rewove entirely, so the meaning survived intact. Technical terms slotted into place like gears. Cultural idioms unfolded into English without losing their nuance. By midnight, I had half the document complete. By 4 a.m., my eyes burned. But the last stubborn clause, a buried provision about intellectual property rights, finally yielded its meaning. At 7:58, I walked the finished translation into the main conference room. Vance and his senior team were already assembled, the video wall showing the overseas partners waiting for the call to start. The VP was there too, jaw tight. I placed the stack in front of Vance. You'll want to review page 16, paragraph 4, before you speak, I said. It contains a binding ethics clause you've overlooked, but you'll want to keep it in. It's good business. He flipped to it, scanned the section, and gave a single, sharp nod. Let's start the call. The faces of the East African delegation filled the screen. Their CEO, a dignified woman in a deep blue head wrap, greeted us in French. Without waiting for a prompt, I answered in the same language, my accent precise. Her smile was small but unmistakable. We spoke for several minutes, switching between French and Swahili as we confirmed key points. The rest of the room silent except for the scribble of pens. At one point, she leaned closer to her camera and said something that made my chest tighten. Your father spoke of you often. He said you had his mind and your mother's patience. When the call ended, the deal was signed, with one added condition, that Dr. Aisha Mensah be appointed as lead scientific liaison for the project. The VP sputtered, but Vance ignored him completely, standing to shake my hand across the table. Welcome back to the lab, he said. Within weeks, I had an office on the R&D floor, a badge with doctor before my name again, and a team of my own. But the real shift wasn't in my title or my paycheck. It was in the way people looked at me. Not with pity. Not through me. They saw me. I used that visibility carefully. The first policy I pushed through was a talent audit of non-executive staff. The results were as predictable as they were damning. Dozens of employees with degrees, certifications, and experience far beyond their current roles. Many had stories like mine, different details, same closed doors. Within months, the company had promoted several into better-fitting roles. And every so often, I catch a glimpse of the VP in the hallway. No smirk now, just a tight nod before he moved on. The day I moved the jade pen into a glass display case on my desk, I thought about that morning in the conference room, when I put down the cloth and stepped forward. I hadn't planned it. I'd only decided that silence was no longer an option. Sometimes, the moment that changes everything is just that. One step, one sentence, one refusal to stay invisible. And sometimes, the head scientist you're looking for has been in the room the whole time.